So now that we've seen what an API stands for and what it actually does, we are an AI club, so we need to understand how APIs power AI. So um, okay. So here's how we use an AI API. So who in here uses ChatGPT every day? Okay, most of us. So we're gonna understand um how we use the AI API. So if the user basically types a question saying like summarize this article for me. So the app basically sends that text through an API call to a data center where where the AI model is hosted. So basically we can see after we type in our question to the computer, it goes to the data center. And then the nearest data center will receive the request and route it to a server running the AI model to retrieve the answer for us. So after that is where the AI inference happens. So the data center runs the huge neural network computation. So that's basically the thinking part and generates the summary. And then after that, it returns back to the application where we see it. So we can really tell that APIs really make AI so much easier for us, and they're doing the in between work for us. So APIs make it possible for our phones or laptops to access powerful AI models that actually run on massive servers far away from us. So to go one step further, we can talk about model context protocol. So this is basically the evolution of APIs for this AI era that we're in. So, some of you might have heard of what MCP is if you've taken a few AI classes, but I'll go over what an MCP is. So, while traditional APIs let one app talk to another, MCP basically goes a step further. It lets AI models talk to tools, data, and even other models in a shared environment. So, think of MCP as an evolution of APIs for the AI era. So, instead of just making a single request and getting a single response, as we've seen with APIs, MCP creates a continuous context layer, so it allows different models to share memory and tools and understanding for real time. So for example, one model could use this model context protocol to pull weather data, while another model uses the same context to make predictions and visualize it. So this eliminates the factor of needing separate API calls or reloading information. So it just makes AI models more efficient. Yeah. So let's go over other common examples of where we use APIs in our everyday lives. So, yes. So first we have maps and navigation. So apps like Google Maps or Apple Maps, they use APIs to provide directions and real-time direction traffic updates. So if we see on the Google Maps, we get like the red, yellow when we're like stuck in traffic. So that's all possible through APIs. And then for example, when we use Uber or DoorDash, those apps actually call the Google Maps APIs to calculate routes, estimated arrival times, and display your driver's location for you. So the developers don't need to build a whole mapping system in the Uber or DoorDash. They just use Google's APIs to get the data instantly. So next, social media that most of us are on. So this also like Instagram, X, Facebook, all expose APIs that let other apps interact with their services. So for instance, an app might use the Instagram API to post photos automatically, or the Twitter API to fetch a user's latest tweets and display them inside another app. So similarly, you can see that like even for like Canva, you can log in through using your like Gmail and or like Facebook account. So this basically can happen because the API connection securely shares your login info to this other applications. Um, so yeah, APIs act as building blocks, and they let developers combine features from different platforms to create new and more powerful applications. So now that we know a lot of examples on APIs and what it is, we can actually look at how to code an API request. So like the basics. So this is like really basic API calls. So this is written in Python. It's usually written in Python. It's using a library called request, one of the most common ways to interact with APIs. So at the top, we can see we have the endpoint. So this is basically the web address where each request is sent. So each API has its own unique endpoint for accessing different features or data from that endpoint. So next we have the header section. So it includes the authorization key. So in this case, it's the bearer API key. So all API calls need authorization. So this basically acts like a password or ID badge proving to the server that we have access and permission to use their API. And then next, we have the parameters. So these are like the extra details that we tell the API exactly what data we want. So for example, a keyword to search for or how many results to return. And then finally, we have the response. So this is where the actual API call is being called. So you can see that it involves the endpoint headers and parameters. So where basically after that, the call succeeds, the API sends back structured data, usually in JSON format, which our code can read, display, or process. So this is basically the foundation of how apps, websites, and AI systems communicate over the internet. And then, so this is usually the API format. So when you're coding, when you're like requesting data from, okay, yeah. Okay. So basically, when you're coding API calls, this is the format that you would want to follow. So you would want to have your API endpoint, API header, and then API body. So over here, we can see some like Python code. So you can see the red is where the API endpoint is, and then you would have your headers. So you can see that that's where you would put your API key. And then the body is basically like, what do you want from this API, or like, what are you trying to retrieve from this API to use for your application? Yes. Okay. So this presentation actually ended before I thought. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this before we move on to a Kahoot? Can also check the Zoom. And to the people on Zoom, do you have any questions? You can drop it in the chat. Yes.
Is it a good analogy to think of an API as like a pathway or like just like a pathway where you can like send data to a different area, that data gets like messed with and data sent back kind of?
Yeah, you can think of an API as like API gateway as like a receptionist almost, like if you're going to like a hotel and then you're like trying to get access to a room. So you can think of it as a receptionist. The receptionist will see if you have like the right details to access the room and then allow you to access the room and then get whatever you want from there. So that's how you can see it. So it's basically the API stands as like a pathway between you and whatever data that your application needs. Do we have any other questions? Yes,
I was just saying, can you go back to the slide with the example code?
Yeah.
I think we have a workshop too, right?
The the website is down. The open weather. I tried registering for that and then I couldn't get a key. No, open weather. Like because like I that's the only website that gives like free API keys to people. So I had like a workshop, but then the website stopped working yesterday. Yeah. Yes.
You like describe the process for getting an API key?
Oh yeah, so I actually had a workshop plan. So now we have a Kahoot, but I had a workshop plan. So I kept referring to like this open weather map API throughout my presentation because we had a workshop for that, but then it stopped working. But basically you guys could try this in your free time. So open weather map basically if you register, you can get free API keys to mess with. So you can basically just mess with like retrieving data and just like practicing how to like write API calls to retrieve data from like a database. So like Open Weather is a free database that everyone can use. The website was down, so I could not get API keys from there. So yeah, but you could use that in the future when you want to mess with API keys. or get like free API keys. Oh, we have a question in the chat. Can you explain the body part? Oh, wait, the body part. Oh, yeah. Okay, someone in the Zoom asked, can you explain the body part? So the API body is basically the parameters and the response. So that's basically the body part. So we have like the endpoint, we have the headers, and then we set the parameters that we need from the API request, and then we get the response. So that's what basically the API body covers. Is that clear to the person who's in the Zoom? It's like talking to two different people here, so going back and forth.
Can you go over what are the parameters and yeah, what role do they play in the process, the parameters and response?
Oh, like, wait, can you repeat the last part?
So, so what does the what does coding the response part? How does it plays or what control does it provide to you? And
Oh,
like,
yeah. So the response, yeah. So basically the response part, so the question was, what does the response part play in the code? Like what impact it makes for this API request? So that's where the actual API call happens. So that's where we're calling this API. So like the endpoint. So if we don't have the response part, the API doesn't know what we need from the API. So it basically sends our headers, our parameters, and the endpoint, and it waits for the server to process the request and then store the response. So if the call succeeds, then the API would send back the structured data that our application would need. Is that good?
yeah.
Okay. Yay. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna hop in the boot camp, I guess, in a little bit. I'm looking at the collab. We might try and send out like a different version or something like that, so you can get some hands-on use with an API key, because I feel like that's gonna be pretty helpful if you do a upcoming hackathon or just like any side projects you might want to work on. But we'll get started with the boot camp. The goal of the boot camp today will just be kind of getting you started for making some bigger changes next week. But just some upcoming stuff. We got a trip to the farmers market. That's gonna be this Thursday. We'll be meeting by the library bus stop. We'll just take whoever comes with. So if you haven't been to the farmers market yet downtown, or if you're just want to break after midterms, I know I haven't been this year yet, so it'll be a good chance just to hang out, visit the farmers market, check it out. And then next week we got using AI prompting and context engineering, and we also will have our third boot camp session next week as well. But goes? Yes, Zach. Boot camp time. Yeah.